Díomh Accordia Leon Diop Adam Dom is os on Corla Alien May August Ta Shkertamini on Downerum avec Eglevertliv Inu Ta Istagum there's an Dini Shama Shaw Ta Ahrimoric Chalk San Alien August in Aaron. Unfortunately I can't say the same in Lizard, so I'm going to have to speak the rest of it in English. But hello everyone, I'm really looking forward to hosting this panel today. I'm Leon, I'm the head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion in the Arts Council of Ireland. And before I begin, I just want to say a couple of very quick things before I introduce the panellists. And that is, firstly, thank you to GORM and to Dr. Mamabo for curating this incredible event. Events like these are really, really important to bring us all together where we can have the difficult conversations that need to be had in terms of how we're going to advance our sector while including everybody. Next, thank you so much, John, for those enlightening words. We really need to look at how we are othering people in the arts sector and ask people, when we're including people, what do we want to include them into? And that's some of the big challenges that we have in this sector at the moment and what I have in my role. The arts are so important in Ireland because they speak Lizard. It speaks to the heart. What we're able to do through the arts is deliver concepts and bring people together around different ideas. And I think if we're going to progress our society and if we're going to unite people and bring them together, we need to be doing that through the arts, and the arts is going to play a really important role in it. And I recognise that in my role in the Arts Council. I recognise that we need to be looking inwards. Prior to joining the Arts Council, we had the launch of the Open Up Report, which talked about the systemic barriers that young black people are facing while trying to access the arts. And we've been trying to have greater conversation within the Arts Council as well as to how we can continue to work on ourselves and improve. And we've naturally embedded a lot of the recommendations from the Open Up Report into our EDI policy and EDI implementation plan. We've developed key partnerships with the likes of Pavy Point. We are doing a lot of reach outs and we're connecting with communities that we haven't been connecting with before. And we're talking to them about how you belong to the arts and the arts belongs to you. And that's something that we're trying to progress. The question today is, what can arts institutions do to advance racial equity, both experientially and structurally? And to talk to us about that, we have an incredible group of panellists. So can I invite Dr. Ebun Joseph, Dr. Lucy Michael, Thaís Muniz, and Ishmael Claxton. If you can give them a round of applause. Morning. So we're going to have a conversation for about 40 to 45 minutes or so. Engagement with the audience is going to be critical on this. We definitely want to hear from you. So if you have thoughts, if you have questions, jot them down and we'll leave time at the end for Q&A where we can have a broader discussion. I'm sure conversation will continue later on into the afternoon. I want to start with the artists, as I think your voice in terms of experiences is really important. I'll start with you, Thaís. We've just heard Professor Powell speak about belonging, othering, and the systems that shape people's experiences. What was your immediate reaction to the keynote and to his remarks?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here and for organizing this really important event where we have the opportunity to share ideas. I took many notes. Thanks, Dr. John, for all the amazing concepts and insights shared. Well, I think something that really was part of a feeling that we as artists or migrant community, arts in the migrant communities or people of color always experience is this feeling of dehumanization. And I think when Dr. John brings, let's say, the certain levels of tolerance we have on people that are not part of our taste, this is something that it's really something we need to reflect on. So there's like this level of animalization and not bringing the sense of putting humans or animals in different scales, but there's always this expectation of failing. I think in the performance we also had a text bringing this this message like, how can I fail? So what are these lacks of tolerance we have? And bringing the concepts of bonding and creating communities and where to belong. This is it's something that as this like fundamental human need also brought me to reflect as well. The same way he brought the example of Trump, is like a lot of the times, the sense of belonging, it's what brings so many people into follow religious paths or being part of cults or being part of, because sometimes there are no other places that you can fit, you can see yourself fitting. And then agency, I think it's something that, for me, it's essential even before thinking about where to fit or what institutions are you working with, what groups are you part of. It's like having agency of your ideas, your core strengths and feelings and yeah, I think these are the main, and the stories and narratives as well, which are like, how do we create the images of things that are told? Like, if sometimes you tell a story and you don't mention any physical appearance, what images will you create out of that? So
amazing. Thank you so much. And Ishmael, over to you then. Could I get your reaction as well?
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I have a low voice. Hey everyone, my name is Ishmael. I'm actually also Afro-Latino American, and I've been in Ireland for 13 years. So I have a kind of interesting perspective in the sense of like looking on both sides of the pendulum. In terms of the talk, it was quite amazing. One of the things I really liked was the idea of belonging. And I just wanted to start off with a quick story in that context because of we were talking about travelers or settled people. And I remember when I first came here, I was doing a project with some Irish people, and I actually went lamping, and I'd never been lamping before. And I remember going lamping, and that's when you go hunting for rabbits, and we were like in a field in Kildare, and it was the middle of the night, and these lads had on tracksuits, and I had on like a full like 3-layer outfit, and they were like, "Is this like New York?" And I was like, "Kinda," but it was, but it was just this whole interesting thing of like them letting me in, and I had a few experiences after that hanging out with travelers. But the most interesting thing about it was the fact of like the openness of like just talking to them and being aware of like their own struggles. And they were talking about also, because there's a big thing, they like Caribbean music a lot, which a lot of people don't know. That's a big thing in traveler site, and they like hip hop. So they were like trying to bond with me on like different levels, which I thought was really, really interesting. But like the idea of like belonging, going back to what we were talking about previously, I just think that it's really important to be able to have those conversations and create those bonds. And it's something that I've been able to like work with and learn over the last 13 years. So it's like, that was one of the things I was gonna start off with. And then also in terms of talking about like stories and narratives, like, you know, it's like a lot of times it can be a bit difficult when you're trying to bring communities together, because when you're looking at it from an African-American perspective, our history is a bit different in the terms of like the idea of slavery, and we don't really have like the same connections to the land as the Afro-Irish people would. So here it's more of like tribes. So even when you were talking about the death of the young brother a few weeks ago, you know, it was kind of like, it really was kind of in that narrative of a particular like sub-community, whereas with Black Lives Matter in America, it was like a whole identity across blackness, across America. And I've been to most of the protests here about that, and it seems like even within that, like the conversations were it was centered around like a sub-community again. So it's like, how do we try to like find the fusions within that, which is one of the things we were trying to talk about, you know? And I'll kind of leave it there for now.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And just saying with the two artists, what would be your thoughts on racial equity in the arts at the moment? What direction do you feel we're moving in? Or what progression are you seeing, or regression are you seeing?
Well, I think there's this need of dealing with the discomfort of understanding that we are trying to, let's say, give more visibility to communities, but like a question that comes to mind when I reflect about this is like, are institutions aware that practice equity requires them to give more to groups that are marginalized, systemically left behind, you know, or we are like trying to give one place to have that representation as part of your program. And like we know by statistics that Black and Irish artists face less ineligibility rates versus other groups. So for some institutions, how is equity actually perceived? You know, and it's like a really long way to go, especially if we think about marginalized groups just as like the front face of things, but not like who are thinking about programming. And can we think about marginalized groups as decision makers as well, as groups who are able to program for beyond their communities? Or are we only thinking about you will program for this particular community? Like how do we actually balance these opportunities? So, yeah.
And if I can maybe expand on the question a little bit more for the two of you, how would you know, or how do you feel that you are working with an institution that understands that racial equity? What do you see in those institutions that tell you that this organization understands racial equity and is engaging in it? I mean, we've a number of organizational and institutional leaders here at the moment, so I think it would be important for them to hear that, for them to hear this.
Do you want to go with that? Or I can go. I feel that something that for me it's quite alarming is like when I'm the only person to represent a whole group, or to represent a whole diversity in the program, or what's the story, the history that that institution have, or even like what are the topics that I'm invited to talk about in that institution. It's like, am I allowed to bring reflections on the blue sky, or you know, I'm the person who are only invited to talk the hard talk, and then on that event that I'll be presenting a part of, the attendance will be focusing only in people who look like me, you know, or not distributed around the broader program. So
yeah, absolutely. And if I can bring Ishmael in on that.
Just going back to the original question and going into that, I think that with what I've seen a lot, as Thaís was kind of saying as well, is that I think that there's a lot of unrecognized genius out there. There's a lot of artists out there that like people just don't necessarily know about or don't pick up on, because a lot of times you always get like kind of the same group that represent all of the diaspora within Ireland. And so within the last few years, it's like it's been mostly just like my same colleagues who are kind of just like doing the same thing. And I just feel like there should be more. There should be more people involved. There should be more people recognized. And I think that the reason is because there's such a tight line within the institutions that you have to walk. And so it's like if you try to do something a little bit different, it can be quite hard. And also one of the biggest problems is that like it's the idea of like this box checking and like a controlled experience.
Yeah.
And so like I've found when I've done either residencies or I've done other things, it's always like they wanted me to show a particular body of work, or they want me to always have like a certain narrative. And when I try to break out of that, it can be a lot of pushback on it. And I think for like younger artists or for other artists, for them it could be a little bit harder or a lot harder, because they're just breaking into these spaces. So, they don't want to rock the boat, So I think there needs to be a lot more space to be able to give people a bit more space to be able to do their thing, what I mean, rather than following these tight lines. And also, like Thaís was saying, I think it shouldn't always fall on specific people to take the brunt end of the stick, you know what I mean? It should be more open and a bit more diverse.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for those contributions. I want to look to the kind of broader picture and research in the space. So over to yourself, Lucy, then. So you spent many years researching these issues. How closely does what you've just heard from the artists align with the kind of evidence that's there?
Well, I'm feeling pretty old today, actually, because Professor Powell and I have been looking at similar theories over the years. Look, one of the reasons I'm in this work is because when I was a kid, I was in a school that was very diverse, where belonging was not reliant on your faith or your skin color, and that had such an impact on me. So I'm absolutely committed to the idea of belonging. But I think I want to put Professor Powell's speech back a little bit of context in terms of his career and where he comes from, which is that he's a professor of law. He was one of the, key actor in the ACLU. And one of the challenges in Ireland we've had is to name race, to say that there are protections in law that are afforded to people on the basis of ethnicity where they might be discriminated. And so there's a temptation, I think, with institutions in Ireland to cleave to these ideas of inclusion and belonging because they feel soft and vague and fuzzy. And I think, do read Professor Powell's 2012 book, because actually it sets out really clearly, it isn't just the institutional arrangements that get in the way. Legal protections are fundamental to belonging. The idea of being part of decision-making is fundamental to belonging. Full participation is fundamental to belonging. We do actually have laws that allow institutions to move that direction, encourage them to move that direction. One of them is the EU Race Directive, which almost nobody in Ireland knows about, but can be directly applied here over our legislation if there are gaps in our legislation. And the Workplace Relations Commission did that for the first time only last month. Okay. So we're seeing changes in that. We're always encouraging organisations. The EU Race Directive says if there is a gap and you can quantify it or you can evidence it, you can take any targeted measures to fill that gap insofar as the targeted measure stops. So it's a form of affirmative action like the US has, but we shy away from that kind of stuff in Ireland because we think that we're not allowed to do it, and then we move towards these ideas. So I want to really say, Powell's work is so powerful in this area, but it has to sit in that context of legal protection and knowledge. We don't have enough black lawyers or people from the global majority, teachers, decision makers in government representation or civil or policy makers, local or national government. So we're way behind the States or even mainland Europe in that sense. So if we take that concept of belonging and really apply it in the arts sector, where often I think people forget about things like employment equality because so much of it is self-employment. Yeah. Actually we have to kind of really put that rights bit back in as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you're speaking to initiatives like affirmative action there and similar types of initiatives, that is something that we get quite a lot of heat on in the Arts Council whenever anything is seen to be doing, or whenever we're kind of highlighting that we're working with an artist who may be coming from a minoritized background. The kind of heat that comes from that is huge. So I want to look then maybe at the broader picture again, Ebun. And you've a critical role in Ireland as the Special Rapporteur on racial equity and racism. And my key question to you at the moment would be, where do you think we're standing when it comes to racial equity at the moment?
Thank you so much, and thanks to everyone who's here. And I think the first act we saw kind of showed us, how important art is, and it can bring people together and it can just blur the lines. We're constantly trying to draw those lines. We're constantly having more categories every day. But, immediately art can just blur those lines. They can just disappear, and we can just see ourselves, stepping from one line into the other and being the other and being able to, look at that. But I think that Ireland is at a moment of contradictions. and we're there. So on the one hand, we have made significant progress in race equality. We have. We have the NAPA, the National Action Plan Against Racism. We have that. So we have a whole of government approach to tackling racism. We actually have a document, we have a policy, we have something that as a nation we can actually hold our government accountable. So we actually have moved, a long way. So that's the one hand of the contradiction. But then the other side is that, we are actually seeing more visible, we are seeing more inequalities remain, So one hand, we are seeing that, but then we are looking on the other side, we are seeing that these inequalities remain. So from everything from, in political representation, in housing, in, job market, we can see all of that, So the challenge I'm saying is that, while diversity has increased, equity has not increased. So the challenge we are having is that we have more diversity without equivalent equity. So that's where it becomes a problem. Something I always say is that when you bring diverse people into a place that you have not made inclusive, accepting, when you have not changed the space, you harm people. And that's what we're seeing. So we're going to see more clashes, not because people are more wicked or more harmful, no, but because there is more opportunity for interaction, for contact. So we look at the United States and we say, oh my God, they're really bad. No, it's not because they're worse than us. We've just had our own George Floyd moments. It's just because we have, in the United States, there are more opportunities on all levels of power for blackness, whiteness, and difference to collide. And that's why we see more outbursts, not because they are worse than us. If we are put in the same positions, those same things will play out, unless we do something to actually make the change. And I think that's where and I think the keynote actually captured that as well. It captured the contradictions, because he said something that made me say, yes, that's the sadness I've been feeling for the last 4 weeks. He said, are we saying that black lives do not matter? And that just captured I've been feeling kind of down, and it captured the downness, because the last 4 weeks have just been really mental, for the black community, for diversity, for race and inclusion. But, the speech also captured the hope. The hope is that, the narratives we tell, the stories we tell, that the stories are working. So when we are listening to stories, the stories are coming to do a job. So we can also do the job of telling stories that transform, that there's a circle, so that circle of care, who matters, who is in there. But I think the most profound one for me is that, we've expanded the circle of belonging before. We can do it again. And I think for me, that's the hope I held, from the speech, that we've done this before. There was a time when black people could not be in classroom. There was a time when women could not vote. There was a time when rape within marriage was not seen as a problem. We've expanded all of those, into that circle of belonging, that circle of care. We can absolutely do it again.
Yeah, super. Thank you so much, Ebun. Lucy, if I could bring you back in, if you could briefly speak to the Open Up report and what it revealed about the experiences of racialized communities within the sector, considering your work on it. And then I'd like to bring yourself and Ebun back in on kind of what you're hoping to see in the future in terms of research in this sector. So, Lucy.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Leon. So the Open Up report was published by the Arts Council 3 years ago, and it has been a surprise to me how big an impact it's had on people. And I say that not because I didn't want it to, of course I did, but it was commissioned as a very small and finite exploration in an 8-week period of what looked like a statistical aberration, right? Why was there this ineligibility rate amongst black artists? And but of course I couldn't leave it there. What they really thought they would find was that there was a group of people who needed mentoring and needed support and needed skill building and so on. And that's not what we found, because when we went to the international literature, what we found was the Irish arts sector had a lot in common with other countries, which was very much a commitment to the idea, the myth of meritocracy, a fierce liberal individualism, that means that we tend to close our social networks instead of opening them, particularly the more competitive resources are, which the arts sector, of course, drives us towards. And the challenge within that is that shared tastes and cultural socialization determines who we think is the right kind of creative, right? And so it then doesn't become about us being racist, but actually whether that person fits our idea of whether they are a suitable artist for funding, for exposure, for collaboration or whatever else. So we found that black artists who'd grown up in Ireland and were part of arts groups for a long time were doing really well. But those who had grown up in families that were not connected to the arts or didn't engage in the arts, or who had come later in life, and we spoke actually to older black artists as well to get their sense of the longer picture. And what we saw was, while some did say, like, we really do want some mentoring, we do really want some help navigating the arts space because we've been locked out of it for so long. Actually, for lots of people, it was around the accountability, the ongoing programme of work they wanted to see from the Arts Council and the sector as a whole. And so in that very tiny period we had to do the research, it was the voices of the artists that really determined what is in that report. And all we did was reflect them back as strongly as we could. And the launch, I think, was really key of that, to having artists speak back to the findings of it. So a couple of key things in terms of what we put in it as recommendations was, one was accountability and review. Ongoing programme of work that starts there but does not end there, and centering black artists in that work, in co-creation, in agency, as ambassadors, very much reflecting the principles of what Powell has just been talking about on belonging, that co-creation and agency. And I think that some of the things that Thaís mentioned earlier were that risk perception, that often arts organisations see artists from minority backgrounds as coming with financial risks, that they won't bring the same audience, or they won't speak to their existing audience. And we heard from artists, I'm being told I have to bring my whole audience if I want exposure, if I want access. But we also saw illegal activity, like where black artists were being barred from spaces, from venues, even where they were booked to play. And so there were real challenges there of exclusion. So, and then that diversity piece that Ebun just talked about, yes, we've seen more diversity in the arts sector, people banging on the door to get in, but those who did get in, like Thaís just mentioned, the pressure to assimilate, or like Ishmael said, to fit a certain tick box because they invited you in on that premise, that was so clear in what the artists told us. So I would like to see that ongoing piece.
Yeah. 100%, and I can definitely understand that pressure, and that's been fed back to us as well in terms of when you're in the space, that nearly requirement to assimilate. And I think the image that John showed in his remarks is critical. Is the main takeaway for me in terms of what we need to do in terms of the art sector, and that is that we have exclusion. We know what exclusion looks like. We know that our arts institutions can be homogenous, and we know what it looks like to also include people, which is carving out that small bit of space where they can come in, but they are a guest in our home, and they need to apply by our rules, or it's not going to happen again. But really, that belonging piece is where we need to get to with I feel, the art sector and our arts institutions. So, did you want to come in?
Can I just come in on one thing? This wasn't our first research project with the Arts Council. In fact, it was our fourth. We had previously tracked gender, race and disability data that the Arts Council had collected, and they were the first organisation to do so amongst all public bodies in Ireland. But we'd also been engaged in reviewing the Arts Council's progress under their own EDI strategy, where the progress was really slow. And that's why accountability features so sharply in the recommendations here. Is it's not enough to go out and do the nicely. You also need to hold yourself to account and allow others to hold you to account.
No, absolutely. And then Ebun, as someone who's looking at a whole government approach, when you're focusing in on the Department of CCS, in terms of research, what would you like to see next, or in terms of outcomes, what would you like to see next?
So just a few things, I think that when we look at what arts can do, like if we're talking about statistics here now, you would forget, but you can remember a story. You can remember a film. You can hear. So these are key things, that we can see, that difference comes in the storytelling. We can also see that, I would love to see that, we're actually using art to humanize, like what we've had, seen is that, a lot of people are dehumanized. We call them immigrants. So this tie to immigrant means, you can keep them out, you can do this, So that's that word immigrants. It doesn't mean what it means anymore. It actually means a whole set of, which I don't have time to unpack, but it actually means a whole set of negativities that you are permitted to do all of this to them, and you can watch it and be desensitized and feel nothing. So art can help us to, I would love to see art being used to humanize, those kind of things. We also have, structural changes, and these are really key, structural changes that must happen. Just for time, I want to make sure that I don't forget them. So there are 5 key things which I thought, were important, because a lot of my work, a lot of the work I'm doing now is looking at the whole idea of acceptance, And one of the things, I know we all talk about belonging, but one of the things I say is that there is a missing link, before I can belong, that I can never belong to a place I have not been accepted. So in belonging, it is implied, but the structures you're dealing with are built not to see the implied. So they focus on the belonging. And unless we explicitly force the structures and systems to say, what are you doing to accept difference? When you say belonging is you. You need to belong. You change your shit. Forgive my French. You change yourself. You do the work. You come and belong. So that's what structures do. They are built, when we talk about equality and equity, actually there should be no difference. But we see that the structures are interpreting equality to mean treat everybody the same. We say no. Give people what, so that's why we've had to focus on equity, because equality wasn't doing the job. It's the same with belonging. Belonging, people are saying it unless you actually take the time to break it down and say, there is a role, there is a responsibility for you, then it means I need to do stuff. So 5 key things I'm going to just quickly mention, just for time, is that, sorry, my notes.
Really quickly, just while you're looking for that,
just to say that we should audit policies, processes, and outcomes. Really important that, that we must audit the policies, the processes, and outcome. Remember, racism is not about he said, she said. That's individual. It's structural. So there are systems of operation. So these 2 things take power and policy. Power and policy. For you to change a racist system, you must change the policy, you must change the power structure. You ask yourself, what is enabling this thing to happen? What systems, what policies are we put in place that enables this to keep repeating? Because it just repeats itself. Even if you remove that manager and bring a new one, it will repeat. Why? It's a structure. So we need to see changes, auditing our policies, auditing our system to see what have we put in place that reproduces this result. If we tackle it from that level, we make the change. If we look at, embedded accountability, and Lucy has talked about that we must make sure that accountability is embedded within the system. It's not something, it's not enough to say, how many black people were there, how many Roma people were there, how many tribes. No, that's not enough. We must look at, accountability, for that thing. We must also look at, invest in pipelines and pathways. Really important that we invest. Who is there? Where are we bringing them in? What is the pipeline? Who is being fed into the system? Now, a lot of people want to just do only internships and beginning. Yes, then it's going to take us like 10, 20 years to make real impact. So when you are feeding it at the bottom, you must feed in the middle, you must feed in at the top. Because it's people at the top that have the power to bring change. Look, I know we don't have time, so I will stop there, but yeah.
No, and I definitely think I need to go back to the Director of the Arts Council and request a bit of a role change, because I believe that equality is the outcome, but equity is the work that needs to be done in order to get to that outcome. So I want to bring Thaís and Ishmael back in. So when you think of the arts sector, we have a number of different stakeholders. We have funders, arts organisations, Arts Council, government, boards and leadership teams, audiences, and critically the artists as well. And I want to speak to you about who do you think holds responsibility in terms of race equity, and to what levels do they hold responsibility? So Ishmael and Thaís, I'll ask you that.
I think one of the things that is lacking within the whole structure that we keep kind of talking about is that when you're talking about equity or equality, it's hard to kind of create that parallel because in a way, like, Ireland is a former colonial country. And so it's like a lot of the establishment here are still kind of dealing with that, you know, like one of the projects that I've been working on, which is on like decolonizing collections. I've been working with the Natural History Museum, and that museum hasn't been changed since Irish independence, so it's still one of 3 Victorian museums in the world, and most of their collection is from when Ireland was a colony, and most of the collection are from the former colonies of Great Britain. And then looking at it like in contemporary context, this is the first time since it was built that it's like starting to change, and that's over 100 years. And then now looking at it now in terms of like a space for artists of color across the diaspora, I think there needs to be like a Black and Irish museum, you know what I mean? There's nothing there for us. So it's like, how can we say like, oh, we're looking for a balance, or we're looking to try to be understood if there is nowhere to kind of start from? And the thing I was thinking about is that like, if you look around, there's like really interesting museums. So you have like the Rock and Roll Museum, you have the Museum of Illusions, you have all these like kind of small pop-up museums around this area, you know? And a lot of them are privately owned. Some of them are like, they have some sort of government funding, but I think there needs to be something for us to kind of start from, you know?
Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah. And Thaís, in terms of stakeholders and responsibility, what are your thoughts? Is it everybody, or is it everybody at different levels?
I think we all know like how arts and culture are used as soft power, and we know how the influence of institutions are the decision makers of what content is delivered as good or bad, what art is perceived as good or bad. So I do think institutions hold the biggest responsibility. In the same way, I think that us as artists, we must create our spaces of sharing amongst ourselves, understanding like, am I being invited to that event because it's Black History Month? You know, is this like Africa Day? Or is even like Africa Day be an event that cares for the African communities, that any space of care for that communities that are there showing culture, and then like after you go and nothing. So I guess like we, and bringing again Dr. Powell's talk on agency, we must share information amongst our communities. We must share our uncomfortableness and potentially like as collective voices, because we do know that this is a small island in a sense that like you can easily be perceived as an artist difficult to work with, you know, and then how can we promote change and conversations that are uncomfortable, but in a way that you don't rock your boat, as Ish brought before. So I think we have the institutions as the holders, the gatekeepers, and we need to understand that as the bigger picture that needs to change.
And do you think there's a fear within artists of rocking that boat? Oh, yeah. Okay. And
for
could you speak
sure.
to that a bit?
Yeah, I think that, like I was saying before, like unless you have representation, or unless your work is being shown outside of an Irish context, like as artists, like you are very much in a control box. Like, and if, once again, like I was saying, if there's anything that's a bit, you know, shaking the boat, like you can very quickly be put to the side. And I mean, I can give examples, but I'm not gonna go there, but it's just like, you have to constantly be walking a tightrope, and you have to also kind of smile and be grateful for it in a way while kind of cringing your teeth, you know, and it's really, really hard. I've had multiple situations like that, and once again, like, it's only because I'm able to push my work outside of Ireland that I'm able to, like, have these conversations and challenge people. But a lot of my contemporaries, like, they're just kind of only in Ireland, so it's like they're not able to have, like, the similar voice. I think that just comes with a certain level of privilege as well. Yeah. Like I said before, being Afro-Latino American, having my work around the world, like, it gives you a little bit more of a voice to be able to speak against these certain things, you know?
Yeah, super. And Thaís, did you want to come in on the fair piece, or I can move on?
Yeah, no.
Okay, so then over to Lucy and Ebun then, coming into our final couple of questions before we open it to the floor. Just, again, a lot of organisational leaders in the room. You've been working in research in this area for a while. What's one takeaway that you would like organisations to take from this event or from this discussion? So that's to yourself and to Ebun.
Yeah, for me, I would like organisational leaders to look at who is not in their exhibition space, stage space, decision-making spaces, and ask why, and put structural mechanisms in place to change that. Remembering that the Race Directive allows you to take targeted action wherever you have an evidenced gap for as long as that gap exists. And I think we need to be braver. I think we need to hold each other to account in the sector as well, because accountability slips so often in sectors where people are so reliant on self-employment and where people are precarious. It is unfair to ask artists of the global majority to lead out on holding organisations to account. Not just the fear factor. We spoke to many more artists than are in the report who spoke to us and said, I can't take part in an interview, I'm too afraid. And they spoke about exoticization, and they spoke about harassment, and they spoke about so many other things. We cannot expect them to lead. We can ask them, will you be an ambassador for this? Will you come out and join in this project? Will you show other people like your work and your space in the sector? But the organisations have to do the hard part. And I would say, one is, are you meeting your basic obligations on equality here? And if you're not, you've got some hard work to do. But I think that's the next move for us.
Super, thank you. And then Ebun, in terms of one takeaway for the key
I think one takeaway would be to look at how we can actually do this thing called inclusion, belonging, how we can actually make the art look like the island that we have. So because when we look at our art, if it is so, that is the first place, that is the power, that is the powerhouse, that is where the change can happen. Because we were all watching. How do we learn that? Oh, when you're sad, drink. Because we see it in the movies. We see it in all of those things. We say when you're upset, do this. So we can actually begin to demonstrate what Ireland looks like. Use the art. Use it. Not to essentialize difference. Like you say, bring us in for African Day and Black History Month, or when there's something race thing happen. No. Like, how do we normalize difference in our everyday art? How can we use art? It's a question I would love to see if the leaders that are here would go away from here and sit with your team and say, what 3 things, don't look for 20, what 3 things can we do in 2026, 2027 to normalize difference in all of our art? Because that's what, if you see that belonging map, it was not just a corner. We didn't just bring them in the corner. It was normalized. So how can we normalize difference? What do we need to put in place? So it's not just bringing 3 people in at this point and say, okay, that's traveler done, Roma done, Black done. That's sticking it in. It's gonna be like this, But how we normalize it in the speech. I was talking to publishers. I said, even if there's a funny thing we used to call it in Nigeria. We call it waka pass. Waka pass. Like in movies. You just get somebody just walk past. Yeah. So it's called waka pass. I say even if it's waka pass. Like we shouldn't have any art produced that is just all white because it doesn't look like Ireland. We shouldn't have music produced that is all white because it doesn't look like Ireland. Ireland has changed. How do we make our music, our poetry, our drama? Even if it's the hair, even if it's just mentioning braids. Maybe it might be an all-white team, but you mentioned the braids. Oh, I saw a girl with the locks. You've introduced. There are simple things that we can do that it's not rocket science, but it's the will, it's the heart. And I'm saying we need to do that if we want to see that change. Because belonging, we cannot belong to a place we've not been accepted. So you're asking yourself, how can I use my art to show that art in Ireland is accepting of difference? So if there are no wheelchair ramp, then people with disabilities are not accepted. So use your art. Use art to show that we are accepting of difference. We want you to belong here.
Thanks so much for that, Ebun. And then, 100%, absolutely. If I could just, I do want to move to Q&A, so if I could get a final reflection then from the artists, because I know there's a lot of artists in the room as well. What would be your final reflections on today from your own point of view, but also a message that you'd like to share with them? So yeah, Thaís and Ishmael.
I guess reflecting on the ADI perception and the representation perception, even beyond Black communities as well. I think this is something really important when we think about global majority communities and the opportunities. It's something that it's important to acknowledge as a collective, and us as artists exchanging information and thinking about what we are giving, and how much we're giving for how much we are getting paid, because a lot of the times you feel like this is the only opportunity I'll have, and you want to give everything for the price that is not worth it. So know your worth, know your price. It's really important. And even in situations such as is this institution inviting me for on a specific event because of the calendar, have a price for that as well, and then get them to know that this is something that would be important for them to reflect.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you're coming with a lot of wisdom and expertise and lived experience as well that you can share, and oftentimes that is asked to be given for free, which is not fair. So yeah, I think that's certainly something that people should be considering. And Ishmael, final word.
I just want to say thank you again to everyone. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for having us. Just quickly, I was going to say that I think one of the other things, which I think might sound a little bit controversial, but is also important, is that you shouldn't always have to only depend on institutions, I think. One of the most recent things I did was that I organized, I co-curated a show called Black Noise. And basically it was done with, I have 22 Black artists from across Ireland. And we did it collectively together, and it's on for the moment up through the month. And one of the things we realized is that, we just made the space ourselves, essentially, and we were able to do it ourselves and come together and create something beautiful. So I just want you to think that, you don't always have to kind of go a certain route, or you don't have to go a specific line. You can create multiple lines and you can put yourself out there, and just don't be scared, you know what I mean? I feel a lot of times, especially right now, we're living in times where it's everyone is so repressed, everyone is really kind of scared to talk about things, or people are thinking about how's it going to affect them. And, it's just important to be look after each other, and just also be able to put yourself out there as artists, and that's really it.
Brilliant.
Can I just buttress this point?
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. I just want to buttress this point because I teach Black Studies in UCD. And so one of the lectures I teach is on art, So I we look at Black art, and all of that. And, I talk about, things like Ebony Magazine, BET. How did they start? What did they do? They ran parallel. They did not, keep begging, take me in, help me, help me. No, they ran parallel. Do you understand? And we see how and they showed, so they created spaces where they could be. We talk about the Harlem Renaissance, so all of those things, they created avenues. It might not be perfect, it might not be there, but we need to show. See, the only reason I'm telling you, because I have a lot of haters in Ireland and good people who love me, but because I challenge the system a lot, I have gatekeepers, they are massive, they block me everywhere. academy, my professional career, but I've been able to grow. Why? Because I have not gone through the traditional routes. So this one I'm saying now is for my brothers and sisters, black, white, green, blue, yellow. If you're being locked out, you need to take the hand. I use social media, it's called citizen journalism. Like, I use that a lot. I was talking. I'm the one, I go into a room, I put up my hand. I'm always talking. I don't just blab. I don't talk about the environment, I don't know much. So what I know, I speak on, you understand? And when I know, I don't stop talking. Yes.
It's actually funny really quickly that you say that, because I was on the radio the other day and I was talking about this in terms of, like, once again, like the dark times, but within the dark times there's always a renaissance. So I think that we are actually living through a renaissance. So it's like these artists or people who are not necessarily noticed now, 20 years from now, they will be the people who will be like looked at as, who created the movement that we are living through now,
Yeah, and just echoing like what you both said, like about this agency again on creating your own movements and bringing what you want to make, because sometimes when you're not held by institutions, you're able to take it to a radical level of making things the way you want, and then you continue and consistently continue, and then the institutions feels they need you. And so it's like always important to understand, like, if you're being labeling by an institution, there are some things that you won't be able to express, but if you're able to like create your movement and gather your people and understand what you want to say beyond those gates, it's like you can like go really far as well. So yeah.
Absolutely, super. Thank you so much, Thaís. Can I have a round of applause for the panel? Okay, stop clapping. We have 10 minutes. I thought we were going to have 15. We have 10. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We have a roving mic. Please state your name and your organization, and then please ask the question.
So my name is Jennifer. I'm just an independent artist. So my question is to Dr. Ebun. So you brought up that's basically they should look in ways to how to implement inclusivity. And I'm just wondering, in your research, where have you seen that done successfully throughout history, and where have you seen that fail?
Would you mind just...
Implement
inclusion. Where has it worked? Where has it failed?
So would it be like businesses?
So I would be more interested in like the art scene, the creative scene.
I think the examples that we just talked about now, because we don't have so much of it here done in Ireland, but we would have, in the United States, and they have done it, and right now, black music, black art, whichever way, whether it's poetry, it has all come from there, and they've grown in a system that locked them out. And I'm saying to everyone that if they could do it in the I think the United States was the most locked out system. They grew from a system of slavery that say you are not human, you don't have a voice. But they built that voice and they've done it. And in Ireland, we've seen some partnerships, we've seen some good partnerships, and they didn't just pick them out of random, but because they were also doing things on their own. I don't want to name, some theaters, some groups, but they've done some, I've seen some partnerships. What's his name just did a recent one now, art, that is out there. So I think that those partnerships are happening, with even the people seeking international protection. A lot of work has been done out there that is coming out, so there have been a lot of that. So I think that those spaces are there. But we just need to keep, like, if you don't put yourself out there, if we don't see something, they can't locate you. So our job to enter that space of to be included. So I'm saying two things now. One is that what can we as artists do to be included? So that means I have to have something that is out there. Put it out there. Put it out there. Put whatever you have, put it out there where people can see it. And then the second thing is that organizations must deliberately do things to say, you know what, this is an emptiness. 15% of migrants and 15% of our work should reflect this. That is the way, to do it. I've seen that in businesses. Businesses are working actively towards that. And the art has to lead also because you're more visible all over the world.
100%. Thanks so much, Ebun. And if I can expand on that, I do think that there are some examples of great leadership and partnership within the arts sector here in Ireland. Like we do have the likes of Safe to Create, run by Niamh and Grania. We have GORM, which is pulling events together like this. We have a partnership within the Arts Council with Pavy Point, which is enabling us to deliver our work on the likes of NITRIS, the National Irish Traveller and Roma Inclusion Strategy, in terms of building the number of applicants from those communities. And we do need, I'd like to see those replicated, you know, in other spaces as well. And if I can really quickly just touch on the point of, I was at an event recently run by Jafaris. It was a show and tell event, and the question was coming up as well. It's like, well, why do we need to be focused on the system? Can we not just drive this ourselves and push this ourselves as black artists? And my response to that was, of course, like, you don't need to be too focused on funding, but realistically, we need to look at artist careers as like running marathons. And funding is like someone coming and saying, hey, would you like to ride this bike for the next 15 kilometers? That is key. So of course, artists can do this themselves. They can have very successful careers without getting the right supports, without anyone ever looking at them. But realistically, what we need to be doing is showing equity so that these artists are able to have these careers a lot easier or to advance a lot quicker. So just thanks so much, Jennifer, for your question. Anyone else want to come in? Tan?
Thank you so much for all of your words. I just want to touch on the reality of things that are going on at the moment, even when we are creating space for ourselves. We've got an event tonight as part of Black Noise, and I've got a friend texting me asking what time is it, and then saying it might not be safe to go to the event tonight because there's an anti-immigration protest planned. Yeah. Like, we are doing things and we are still being stopped from doing them. And that's the reality. We are exhausted. Like, we are exhausted. We're holding space for each other, and we're not being paid to do that. It's because we care about one another. And I just want to talk about the reality of how it feels to watch on television and seeing that people in your country are turning against you, are saying that you don't belong here, are telling you to go home. Like, that's the reality that we have to live with. Like, this is happening right now in Ireland. Yeah. It's happening here. And I just wanted to put that point out there because, yeah, we are working really hard and we're doing loads of things to bolster each other up and be like, yeah, but this is the reality of it. And yeah.
I really appreciate that, Tan. If I can initially respond, and then if anyone else wants to jump in, please do. But of course, the arts is running in the kind of broader societal environment, which is extremely difficult at the moment for a lot of creatives. And really, for me, I do think the arts has a really important role in countering that too. No revolution is complete without its artistic expression, and I do think that we need to be doing our best to support one another and keep each other safe. But absolutely, we cannot stop the production of art. We can't allow this to stop the production of art. Art is what's going to reach people's hearts and carry us through. So I think even just acknowledging that, look, we are in this together, and we will get through it together, I think is important. But I'd love to hear if anyone wants to come in as well.
I'll just say quickly 2 points to that. But I just want to also speak to what you were saying before in terms of with the funding thing. Because we were just talking about the Harlem Renaissance and a few other kind of previous movements. And what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of those movements were actually backed by wealthy black people, essentially. So it's if you look at it in the contemporary context of Ireland, before we did this, I did a little bit of research, and if you look at the diaspora as a whole, black and brown across Ireland, that's from North America, South America, and Africa, the buying power of a person of color here, I think, is 26 billion. It's something crazy, but I'm just saying that if we had that within our own community where we could help each other, so that way we could help each other in terms of to push towards helping each other's art careers and stuff, it's just the idea of just not always necessarily being beholden to someone else. And then now going to what Tan was just saying, that is the reality of the situation, because even today before I came here, my daughter's mom called me and she was like, is everything all right? Are you safe? And, it is a really, really hard thing to deal with, and it feels like we're going back in time, like we're in the civil rights movement or something. It's actually crazy There was something I saw there in America a few weeks ago where it was a woman who had walked with Dr. Martin Luther King, and then she was marching again because they're trying to take away their voting rights in America. And so this is like a global thing, you know what I mean? So you have to realize like, this is like a play for power, you know? And so it is that point where we do need to come together and show face that, like, you know, we're not scared within these dark times, you know? So it's really important that we look after each other, check on each other, like we do in the discussion group, and also just being aware that, like, although we're fighting this struggle, we also can't let this darkness consume us, you know what I mean?
100%. Thanks so much, Ishmael.
Yeah, I think this point that Tan brought, it's really important, and it reminds me the importance of building community, bonding, and again, bringing what Dr. Powell brought, and not letting the fear take you completely, because fear, it's like, it's something really powerful that can paralyze you, and that's the intention, right? Like when you have people that are mobilized by fear, we try to change, but also we can be immobilized by fear. So I think it's important to understand in which space we are walking, and obviously keep ourselves safe, but not let the fear take the joy and the togetherness, because it's really important to resist. Like sometimes you feel tired of being resisting and be part of the resistance movement and being, but like it's a long way to go. We're not having the discussion for this time being, like it's you know, for future, and yeah.
Thank you so much, Thaís. And Lucy, do you want to come in on that?
Thanks, Leon. I mean, I think we're all thinking about our colleagues and friends in Belfast today after last night. And I think one of the things that's flagged for me is that, you know, in the same way as we've seen leaders in sport talk about, you know, politics not being relevant to sport, except sometimes when it's to make a political point or for soft power. Sometimes our leaders in the arts can be guilty of that too, staying silent when these bigger issues need to be spoken about, because that doesn't belong in the arts, and tolerating like small intercessions of you know, black identity exhibitions or small groupings or collectives. And so there's a sort of tolerance and minimal acceptance there, but actually speaking truth to power, like taking the power of the arts sector and speaking to government and saying all of our artists, all of our venues should be safe. And that's a job for the arts sector too, not just looking inward to the arts sector and who's employed or given a space, but actually looking outward and saying, we, the big we that Professor Powell talked about, we need to be safe. We all benefit from everybody being included here. And you know, in Belfast, arts organisations were speaking out about the need for that bridging when the government weren't and the local authority weren't. They were doing that work on the ground, and when the pogroms happened a number of years ago, nearly a decade, it was the arts organisations that were out first, doing community support to people who were burned out of their homes. And they were community arts organisations, and that doesn't get valued or spoken about enough. So I think that, like, in thinking about our friends in Belfast today, I think we remind ourselves, like, we can do so much more, and one of the things is to say the public sphere, our public discourse, so much reverberates through our art spaces and events, and we can speak truth to power.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lucy. Okay, I think that's what we have time for today. Can I just ask you to give a big round of applause again for our panellists?